In today's video, we have the latest trade talk from around the league. Today, we're looking at teams like the Maple Leafs, the Senators. Could the Flames and Canadiens pull off a trade? Plus, the latest on the Bo Horvat contract situation with the Vancouver Canucks. Some big injury updates, including Maple Leafs Jake Muzzin and TJ Brodie, Thomas Chabot in Ottawa, Curtis McDermott, and many others. Plus, could we also see a goalie trade in the offseason for the Vegas Golden Knights? We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. First up, we have a lot of injury news. We also have a signing and then some trade talk to get into. The Columbus Blue Jackets, man, these guys just can't get a break. The injury list continues to pile up, and they're certainly not in a good situation. They're in a world of hurt in more ways than one here, but now they've lost Patrick Laine, who's out for 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. So certainly he's a very important piece looking to get going in Columbus, and obviously he's another player that's out along with the long list of guys that are already out. An update of sorts on Jake Voracek. There's no timetable for his return, so he could be out for quite a while as well. That's really, quite substantial. 2 of their top 6 wingers, they're struggling at center. A bunch of their defensemen are out. This team is just in a world of trouble that way, and they're in the bottom of the standings, so it's going to be nearly impossible to get out of this without a miracle or some young players really stepping up well above what they're expected to do. In Toronto, we got a pretty significant update today as well on a couple defensemen, including Jake Muzzin, who's been out for some time now. They've determined that he's got a cervical spine injury, so basically in the neck area. So the neck injury that they were referring to, essentially, I guess, was a little bit more accurate. I know some people kind of thought maybe it was a concussion or something like that. And he's not going to be reevaluated until like mid to late February. So that's not promising for him to play again this season, and you have to think that if he does miss the rest of the year, that does put his career in jeopardy. It's unfortunate. Jake Muzzin's had a long career. He has had a successful one, getting his name on the Stanley Cup and being a real solid NHL defenseman. Off the ice, seems like a real well-liked teammate, real good guy, so I certainly feel for him from a personal level and what he's going through. But you have to wonder if this is the end. Now, they're also going to be without TJ Brodie for some time. We had mentioned on the weekend that he was out of the lineup, and there was no update. So some people wondered, is it a healthy scratch? I was like, well, that seems odd to me. Of all the guys you could healthy scratch, why would TJ Brodie get singled out? It didn't really seem to make sense to me. And now we know that's not the case. He suffered an oblique injury and is now placed on injured reserve, so he'll be out probably at least a week to 10 days, could be a little bit longer. They didn't give more of a timeline on him like they did on Muzzin. So essentially with the Muzzin injury, being evaluated later into February, obviously the trade deadline is early March, so that kind of gives them an idea. So I don't expect them to go out and rush, because there's lots of rumors circulating now that we get that update. All the Leafs are going to trade for a defenseman, and they might. I just don't think they're going to rush into it. They're going to try to get through this, just like they did with the goaltending situation. We thought, losing Matt Murray, losing Samsonov, they might go out and get a goalie. It's like, well, the problem here is, and the goalie situation is, unless they're gone for the year, if you pick somebody up, you're going to make your cap situation work. It might be a short-term Band-Aid, but you really should try to plow through with some of the youngsters they got. And you know what? Källgren, he's done an okay job, and they've gotten through this. They didn't win every game, of course, but they're not losing every game either. And they're keeping themselves, decent here in the standings. And now Matt Murray is scheduled to return for the Leafs against the Pittsburgh Penguins, actually, tomorrow. So that's interesting. He'll face his former team here again. So obviously, Murray comes back. Samsonov might be a little longer getting in, but still, slowly starting to come back. They got through it. I expect them to take the same sort of approach here with the blue line. I think a big part of their decision is going to be how well and can Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren handle an elevated role. Essentially, they're 2 young defensemen that were drafted with, some pretty good expectations. They've worked themselves into the lineup, and now's an opportunity for them to really step up and play a bigger role. It's just that simple. A lot of talk around Justin Hall this year and getting moved. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Maybe eventually they might, but with the injuries they've got, and they don't have a lot of right shot D, I expect Hall to stay. Hopefully he can play good. He's had a good moment, so it's not all bad in front of him. But but if they have a chance to evaluate Sandin Liljegren getting a bigger role and then not handling it well, that's when I would expect them to go get some help maybe earlier in the season. If they go a few weeks and it's clear that they're struggling and can't do it that many minutes facing those tougher matchups, then I would expect the Leafs to really go shopping for a defenseman, maybe around Christmas time or into the early part of the new year. Otherwise, if it's going okay and they're still having a good season, good in the standings, they'll probably wait a little bit closer to the trade deadline so they can also evaluate Muzzin just to see, is there a chance he comes back? And then, of course, you can add, differently then, right? Like you can get more of a rental player and you can get more of a situation where, you might be able to get, a player on an expiring contract and, you're not looking necessarily for somebody on a longer term fix. So you don't want to jump the gun just in case. So we'll see how these guys do, but I do expect the Leafs probably add at the deadline regardless, but it might impact what they add or who they go after. Like if Logren and Sandin are doing a real good job, then maybe they just add some depth. But if it's not the case and they're struggling, they need a higher profile player, then maybe they make a bigger splash, right? So it's just that simple. I don't expect them to rush. We'll see what the Leafs do, but a D trade could be happening here once they get a chance to evaluate that. With Ottawa, Thomas Chabot, of course, we know is going to be out for at least a week with a concussion. They called up Jacob Larson, and he is going into the lineup. I mean, some wondered if a healthy Nikita Zaitsev might go in instead. He recently cleared waivers, but he has not been reassigned to the minors. So a lot of people are wondering, what is his future? Is he just going to sit in Ottawa and not play? Will they eventually send him down? Are they going to be able to find a trade? I know it's been reported numerous times, and Pierre Dorian's certainly working on it. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talked about it on the new 32 Thoughts podcast that came out today. Again, talking about how they needed defensemen before Chabot was injured. Now they're really pushing, but obviously Dorian's not going to do anything stupid. He's had lots of conversations and even some offers, but nothing he thought was smart in the short term. He's trying to be careful and protect his assets so that they don't make a rash decision here. But obviously calling up Larson and putting him in the lineup as they play the Islanders tonight, an early start time for those wanting to watch as well, just so they can have the game over before the Hockey Hall of Fame induction, where Daniel Offerton's part of that class. The Senators certainly want their fans to be able to take part in watching that, so obviously those watching on TV can watch both, and then those in the arena can stay after the game and watch the induction ceremony on the Jumbotron, which is a nice gesture too. But obviously with Zaitsev not getting in the lineup ahead of a prospect being called up, that tells you that maybe his time in Ottawa is finally over, and we'll either see a demotion or a trade in Zaitsev's case soon. Obviously, the Sens want to move on from that contract, but it's proven tough, and he hasn't played well, so it's made it even harder. So we'll see. But Ottawa in defense, definitely two that we're going to be looking out for and probably chatting about a fair bit here in the coming days as the rumors circulate who they might be going after. A few other injuries. The Avalanche, Curtis McDermott is going to be out for about 6 weeks with a lower body injury as well. And as mentioned, we also have a signing today. The Nashville Predators have signed themselves 19-year-old center prospect Nolan Burke from the OHL Sarnia Sting. He gets a 3-year entry-level contract. Of course, he was eligible for the draft last year and did not get picked. So because of that, he could have re-entered the draft, but he also could be a UFA and signed now. So he goes to Nashville. He's right now for this year, he's already got 15 goals and 24 points in 16 games for the start his season in the OHL for Sarnia. So it's a real good start. So we'll see where that leads down the road. Now, with the trade front, there's an article from Dan Rosen. Dan Rosen's mentioning that he fully expects that things continue the way they are in Vegas, that next offseason, this is not going to happen anytime soon, that Robin Lehner is going to become a trade piece of the Vegas Golden Knights, assuming he's able and ready to return and play next year like everybody suspects him to do. But right now, Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill's been a real nice find for the Golden Knights. They're doing the job. The Golden Knights are off to a tremendous flying start, and they're pretty comfortable with this new dynamic duo here. So Robin Lehner's services, even though he's got some term on his contract, may not be really needed anymore. Now, of course, coming off a serious injury and missing the entire season, trading that contract will not be easy. That's for sure. So hard to say. Now, obviously, a team that might not be having playoff aspirations, we'll say, but really needs an experienced goaltender might be more willing to take that. Hard to say. But it probably would be a case where Vegas trades him, but not much of anything, maybe even nothing as a return. I don't know, because it could be a pure cap dump. For right now, they can't move that contract. They really want, a need because of their situation, the LTIR availability. So we'll see where things go, but I would expect the goaltending duo in Vegas continues to play the way they have, that Robin Lehner's time in Vegas will come to an end, and when he's ready to return next year, that he'll be on a new roster. There's some that think as well in Pittsburgh that Kasperi Kapanen, if he can't be traded, it could find himself on waivers in the near future. I don't know how bold of a move Brian Burke and Ron Hextall want to make in Pittsburgh, but like I talked about a few days ago, it's fair to say that that team is not really thrilled with where they're at in the standings. They committed a lot of money in terms to bring back a bunch of players, and obviously the team as a whole not doing the best, and there's some talk that they may make a few changes. Of course, they want to make sure that all that money that's well invested gets them to the playoffs, and right now that's far from a guarantee. It's still early, of course, but if they continue to skid like they've been, that might be a challenge for them this year, that's for sure. You've got an upstart team in New Jersey, push them in the Metro. The Islanders are a bit of a surprise comeback team this year. Of course, the Carolina Hurricanes are right up there. The Rangers, even though they're not doing the greatest right now, they had they're still a real good team too that'll be in the mix, I'm sure. So it's not going to be easy. And obviously the Penguins may need to find some ways to add some extra firepower here, and maybe moving on from Kapanen might be able to be a way to do that. If they can't trade him, can they bury the contract and get some relief? I don't know. It's hard to say, but he's not living up to expectations in Pittsburgh, and his name is once again circulating. With Bo Horvat, Elliotte Friedman talked about today on the 32 Thoughts podcast, the surprising nature that the fact that Jim Rutherford and the Canucks were in Toronto for the game against the Leafs on the weekend, and of course Rutherford was on the trip along with Patrick Allvin, and his agent, Horvat's agent Pat Morris, was based out of Toronto. They're all in the same city, and yet no new discussions. Over a couple of days, there was lots of opportunities, and there was no talks. So that's kind of telling and surprising all at the same time that maybe the Canucks are convinced that it's not time for an extension for Horvat, and maybe they are ready to move on and ready to sell high on a player who's having a phenomenal season here in a contract year, again, like Miller did last year, right? So obviously, like I said, the Miller contract right now to me is not looking great. That statistically, offensively, he's doing all right. There's no issues there, but his effort and defensive play are atrocious. There have been some pretty egregious defensive lapses, or just lack of trying, in my opinion, has kind of caused things to go south there. But it's not the only reason. The biggest problem in that team is the fact that the Canucks don't have great defense. Their D-core is extremely weak, arguably one of the weakest in the NHL, in my opinion. And they even though they have a really good goalie in Thatcher Demko, he's not playing like it. In the past, I said before, the Canucks, I really like a lot about them and think they can be a really good team here in the future, near future at that. But Demko covered up a lot of their weaknesses, and now that he's not playing at that all-star level, they're going to be exposed. It's just that simple, and they need some help on the blue line, and that's on Rutherford, not Boudreau. But Friedman talked again about the fact that they hope to have some clarity here soon. The fact that the Canucks are inducting Luongo and the Sedin twins in the Hall of Fame tonight, it's not something we're probably going to see here a little bit. We don't want to draw attention away from that, but you have to think the next week or two something's decided here between the coach and can they maybe make a decision on Horvat, because it's just getting complicated. And I think there's a lot of tension in Vancouver. Could we see a trade between the Flames and the Canadiens? An article in Montreal Hockey Now website talking about the fact that we know the Flames are looking for a scoring forward. We learned that from Elliotte Friedman back in the late summer, and it's still a case today. He's reiterated that in recent podcasts. We know the Flames have been struggling lately. Daryl Sutter's kind of put his lines into a blender. Tonight he's even got Jonathan Huberdeau coming back and playing on the third line, for example, but they've got really things shaken up, and he hasn't been pleased with Huberdeau's play and production, and he's still trying to find the right spot for him to play. So, interesting to say the least, but could Montreal's Josh Anderson or Mike Hoffman be the player they're looking for? They want a scoring winger? Well, those are the two guys, and that's certainly could be available. Hoffman, I think, is available for sure. He's been on a hot streak here lately. He's only got this year and next on his contract, where Anderson signed longer term. But some question in this article talks about Montreal Hockey Now that they wonder if Josh Anderson's style of play really fits the mold for the way Marty St. Louis is trying to get this team structured for the future, and that maybe a trade might be in order. I mean, especially if they can get a good return and get some more youth here to go along. I don't think they're in a hurry to trade Josh Anderson by any means. I think Kent Hughes and the Canadiens had numerous opportunities over the summer. It sounded like they had a lot of interest, a lot of calls on him, and never pulled the trigger. So I do think that they do like him and see him as maybe being with the team longer term as well. But if the right offer comes along, you got to think that there's a match there. But be one of the two players, because we know the Montreal Canadiens really want to unload some cap space and unload at least a couple of forwards here before the deadline, because they have too many. And it's just that simple. It's a numbers game. Calgary needs somebody. It makes sense that they would make good trading partners. And obviously Anderson, I think he'd be a great fit in Calgary. Based on how Daryl Sutter likes to play, Hoffman could be a good short-term solution, but I think they'd like Anderson better. But I'm not sure what the price tag would be, what it would take for Calgary to pull the trigger on that. But certainly an interesting article to take a look at. Two Canadian teams maybe hooking up on a possible deal. So that is all your news and rumors for today. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe. Stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.